Evening all. Yeah, I think we have one of the older streams in the wrong playlist. Hang on, I am just checking. You may hear me twice. I don't think it's in any playlist actually. And I'll fix that after the stream. It's obviously not labelled properly, so it's not coming up in the list. Oh, okay. We'll go through it afterwards and have a look. Yeah, all good then. All good. So yes, here we are. It is Wednesday. And I've had a busy day today. I've been sorting rooms out and I was laying laminate down yesterday. It's all been a bit hectic around here. But I've been a busy beaver and I'm quite impressed with something that I did. I like it when I impress myself. Let me just do a quick demo a sec. So one of the things that's kind of a time-consuming and arduous task is setting all the view distances for flooring and lights and all that stuff. Oops. So, whoa, camera, calm down. So if we click on a lighting panel, i.e. this one, and we look at its details, you can see that we have a max XY render distance. And this is basically just telling it how far away this should be visible. And normally we would do this manually by kind of just, sort of hiding around the corner a bit, and then we can press this button here to see how far away that particular actor is. So what I've done is, because that takes ages, having to manually click on each one and then kind of hide yourself around a corner, I've written a script that does literally all of them all at once. So I've now got ceilings, floors and walls, and all of these should now have render distances which are calculated on the fly based on a sphere of line traces. So basically we're just doing a big ball of raycasts outward from the center of the corridor. So we're measuring from like in the middle there. And we take basically the longest raycast and we make that the view distance for the mesh. So for some of them, like the floors in here or the lights in here, there are going to be some rays which go out the window to infinity. So we're capping those at 10,000 units. But most of them, obviously you're in a corridor, so there's only going to be a certain view distance. So for a panel like this one, for example, so the view distance, so the longest raycast was only 1500 units. So that light doesn't need to be turned on if the player is more than 1500 units away. Which goes into also our deck optimization. So if the player is on a different deck to the light, then the light won't turn on. And it's just, that's how we're optimizing having the something like 2,000, 3,000 odd lights that we've got on the ship. But I did it for flooring as well. So this one should now be updated. Yeah, so you can see that these floor tiles now have their own manually, automatically generated view distances, which are generated by the script. I did it for the entire ship all at once, so they should all have their distances set now. And what this does is it helps with things like nanite overdraw, because obviously, like when you're around the corner like this, that mesh doesn't need to be drawn at all, which means we're removing it from the pool for things like occlusion queries. it's pointlessly querying this for occlusion, which is obviously hitting the CPU, if we know it doesn't need to be drawn in the first place. So by running this script and setting maximum view distances on our meshes, we know that once you're around the corner, that mesh is essentially just gone from the system entirely. It's not generating queries, it's not generating any nanite overdraw, it's just gone. Because nanite itself doesn't allow you to set view distances on a mesh. So you could set your view distance on there, and nanite will just ignore it. And I don't know why. There's probably some reason for why it doesn't cull, but it doesn't do any kind of distance culling. So we're just setting the mesh to hidden instead. But yeah, so that is helping a great deal, hopefully, with overdraw and just general optimization. I haven't done the wall panels yet. There was 1,042 1,042 floor panels. The debug text is coming up in the wrong place because I forgot to move it. But yeah, so that's how many floor panels we have on the ship right now, which is kind of crazy. But there's going to be at least double that for wall panels. And it took about half an hour to do those 1,000. Obviously, with it creating a sphere of line traces for each one, it obviously takes like half a second or so per panel. But yeah, so I was quite pleased with that. It all worked first time, and it does the job by the looks of things. Oh, you've got me confused as to what day it is now. It's definitely Sunday, isn't it? I'm not going mad. It's definitely Sunday. Yeah, so tonight we're working on more Caravella stuff. 1 per degree on Inoni, so I guess that's 360 times 360. Yeah, so 129,000 line traces per panel, which takes about half a second. That's not bad. No, it's a 3D, it's a sphere. Because what we do is, so for 360 degrees, we also do 360 degrees. So we are, yeah, so it's 360 times 360 to give us the entire sphere. So yeah, a lot. But it means that we've got that kind of granular detail. Oh, I don't know. I think it's fairly quick. I mean, if I turn on which one's floor 1, just for a laugh, let's turn on that for a second. Do it for 10 milliseconds. So if I press the button, so it's now going through each panel in turn. We should hopefully see some once it's doing some in range. Obviously I don't know which panels it's doing. It just gets all actors of class, so where those particular individual actors are could be anywhere. And I can't move the camera because it's busy. No, I'm not actually doing them normally. Hang on, let me cancel that a sec. If I just do a single panel, like this one, like that one there, So there's the line trace sphere. It's mental, but I think that's granular enough that we're certainly gathering the data we need from it. Yeah, this is all purely in the editor, so none of this happens in the game while you're playing the game. We do it to trace the distance whilst we're in the editor, and then obviously this panel now has that distance set, which again was whatever the longest line trace was. That's what we get for our draw distance. Maybe. I guess it's just chugging through, isn't it? Because it's... So what are we doing? Yeah, so basically for each actor, we do our first 360, and then we do our pitch and yaw from the rotator, so we do a 360 again. So that's how we draw our sphere. And then for each of those rotations, for each of those vectors rather, we just draw our line trace. I guess that's just how long it takes. But yeah, 129,000 raycasts in about half a second ain't bad, really, for a blueprint widget. And again, it's not runtime, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, when it's running, it's not using the debug. So when it's running, it's not drawing anything. It's literally just doing the line trace and gathering the hit result. I guess the time taken is probably the fact it has to then process the hit, get the vector of the hit location and that sort of thing. I guess all of that takes time. Yeah, no worries. So, Caravella. Oh, actually, no, there's one thing I will just demonstrate before I turn that off. Is after the stream on Wednesday, I went and found a much better fire effect, and I've tuned it so that it stays within the limits of the glass and just gives us a little subtle smoke effect as well, along with some heat warping. But I figured that was a hell of a lot nicer than the other one we were messing about with. And I've also fixed the fact it went pink. So yeah, so we've got a correctly coloured fire now. And I also made like a flickery lighting effect for it as well, which I was quite pleased with. What I particularly like is it's casting shadows. So it's nice, like on this ladder, we've got two different shadow casts happening. One from the ceiling lights and then one from the fire. So I'm liking like multiple shadows on objects. But yeah, I thought that turned out quite nicely in the end. And also because of the light source in the middle, rather than casting light from each Niagara particle, it's just a single spotlight, or point light rather, and it means that we're getting shadow casts on the pebbles as well. So the pebbles actually have a lot more kind of 3D like physicality to them because of the point light that's casting a shadow. All in all, I like it. So yeah, we'll hopefully build outward with that level of quality. Again, this will be retractable and the fire will go away if you don't want the fire and the glass there. Thank you, Danger Mouse. This is already in the current dev build if anyone wants to go and check it out. Right, yeah, so Caravella. Let's make sure we're using the right file. Yeah, well, it's supposed to be a hologram. It's not a real fire. So the idea is that the glass is what's projecting the hologram. So it's like an optical illusion type hologram. So it's not a true hologram like you get on the bridge with a holo display. The hologram requires the glass in order to be visible. Yeah, we could do the reactor room. We kind of need to kind of finalize a bunch of the framework because we need to measure out exactly where the wall panels are going to be going. So we need to do that. Let me turn off deck 1. Let's get rid of that a minute. Needs to be part of the deck 1 frame, really. Actually, I'd like to get those stairs done at some point as well. Just making sure that we have the alignment and the space we need for those. We're pushing it a little bit on the headroom. I wanted to make the pylons kind of as practically narrow as I could. Yeah, we're just about okay headroom wise when you're going up and down the stairs. I mean this guy is 6 foot, so he'd be okay, but you're definitely scraping your hat if you're wearing one. But for that very reason, we can't make these pylons any thinner than this. And that'll be true for any ship we make. The pylons can never be thinner than it takes for one person to walk up them. Oh yeah, the stairs won't be this wide. We'll have utilities and things running up them. So I'll probably limit the stairs to where we got our frame lines running through here. So where these are, it won't be fully hollow like that. Obviously we'll have bracing all the way down. I'll probably put the handrails attached to the bracing on either sides, so the stairs wouldn't be any wider than this. Less, however far the railing sticks out. And then this cavity on either side is where all the pipes and cables and things will be running up for the engines, like fuel lines and that sort of thing. Obviously within reachable distance of the stairs, so that you can perform work on them. That's on the wrong layer. There we go. Not yet, Anasi. I'm only allowed to work on this on Sundays, so once the stream ends, that's it. I'm tools down and back to working on the game proper. Okay. So we had a little bit of arranging to do around engineering. Let's hide these crew quarters a minute. So as it stands right now, we've got the chief engineer's office here, and we've got a little corridor that comes through here. And the reason that the corridor is all the way over to that side is because of the hull and the way that it curves around. I'm going to stretch this out a little bit at some point, which means that corridor can move back over. But I'm not 100% happy with all of the fuel and coolant tanks being the thing you have to walk through in order to reach the main engineering stairwell. So I was thinking something more along the lines of, on deck 3, we've got 2 corridors going to the shuttle bay. We don't need 2 corridors going to the shuttle bay. That's kind of waste in many ways. And this particular corridor just happens to be between where the stairs need to go for the engines, which means we have a big hole here where we can put a doorway into the main engineering stairwell. So in actual fact, we don't need then to traipse through this corridor here and the coolant room in order to get to the rest of engineering. We can instead just turn this into an engineering corridor with the engineering access being here, and we can move those around, and then just block that door off on that side. So that's the way into the ship, and then that's the way into engineering. Just seems to make a lot more sense that way, because then you have direct access straight to the stairwell rather than having to go through stuff first. Yeah, so in terms of percentage to completion, that's a difficult one to answer, because as much as we are pretty much done with our layout, other than some minor tweaks like where that corridor runs, I guess the next job is mostly going to be just the artistic stuff, designing the paneling, getting the paneling in place. And we've already done the corridors, barring some tweaks. So I would say it can be relatively on par with the Magellan, probably in a few months. Again, bearing in mind, I'm only working on this 4 hours per week. So what are we on now? So we're on 23. So by the end of tonight's stream, that would be 23 times 4. That would be 92 hours worked on the project. So we've got this far in 92 hours of real actual work. Or thereabouts, obviously, because this stream is not over yet. So, yeah. There's only so much you can get done in 4 hours. I don't think we're going to use much at all, really, in the way of assets, because obviously it's going to be a smaller reactor, so that all needs rebuilding. The chillers that are going to go here are going to be different. Yeah, so I don't think anything. I mean, even the UI screens, I'm going to try making physicalized mesh UI screens rather than using widget panels, because it uses well, no VRAM practically, and I can do more with them. I can style a 2D mesh far more easily than I can style a widget using Unreal's widget system. It's in many ways it's quite restrictive. I mean, you can obviously do a lot of work in Photoshop and then import that as images and stack those images to make a nice design, or I can just hop into SketchUp, actually make the panel I want as a 2D mesh and just use that mesh in the game world. I think generally that's going to work nicer, but we'll give that a try on this ship and see how it goes. And yes, I'm back on the fizzy water. Yeah, to be honest, I think even the bolts that hold the panels on will be different, because when I scaled the bolts for the Magellan, I'm not quite sure how I ended up with the size I ended up with, but it's not a standard metric size. So I'm going to look at actual metric bolts and do the bolts properly, so that it has like a real world socket set size for consistency and all. How detailed do you plan to make this game? Yes. That's the only answer I can give, really. Yes. All the detail in everything, right down to bolts and weld lines. Just don't need to add, actually. So all along the base of all these framework bits, I need to just do a little lumpy mesh down there, just to give us a weld line texture. This ship won't have a secondary bridge. Yes, the engineering control room will have the capability of performing a lot of ship functions, but not flying it particularly. It's a very small ship, so a secondary bridge isn't really a thing we have room for. Hunter the Wolf, yes. Every single wall panel can be fixed and damaged. So if we look on this one here, so if I pull up this floor plate, like so, you can see that we've got detail underneath, like brackets and things. So these bolts that you see, at some point when we have a tool for it, you will have to physically remove the bolt in order to remove the floor panel, wall panel, and these are all going to get smashed and broken during the course of your travels. Same with the wall panels. So, that would be smashed and broken, and you'd have to replace it by ripping off the broken bits and putting a brand new one there. And it will have pipes and cables and things running through the walls. So you'll need to take the panels off again to get to that, to fix it. And just like with the floors, there are bolts that you've got to remove. And those bolts will eventually be a separate object. They won't be part of the mesh. Yes, there will be weapons. And you'll be able to, basically, once we add our first weapon, you'll be able to run around the ship literally just trashing everything, like exploding up the wall panels, the floors, the ceilings, just everything. You're completely wrecking the ship, and then the NPCs will dutifully come along behind you and fix it all, whilst tutting under their breath. But yes, everything's going to be damageable, everything's going to be fixable. Yeah, just as much and as in-depth as possible. That's really cool, Oni Noni. Well done. Yeah, there's a demo currently on Steam, Hunter the Wolf, so feel free to download it and try it. I think, that I might keep the engineering door in the shuttle bay. Obviously, we'll make it a secure door, and not that no one can open it other than those that are authorized, and we'll have the general main entrance there. But I think if we're like offloading parts or materials, then it would be nice to be able to just go through there into the engineering stairwell rather than having to carry it all the way around through the crew area, because I'm keen on keeping the engineering section and the crew area completely separate, so engineering can completely go about their business without ever having to enter into the crew area. Like, the two should never cross. You don't want to see people carrying oily machine parts down habitation corridors. The only thing we are lacking on this stairwell is any kind of like equipment lift, and that's probably needed more for engineering than anywhere else. So I am tempted to maybe bring that out there to make room for some kind of a lift. Just a utility lift, basically, because if you've got parts and machinery, you don't want to be lugging it upstairs. Shouldn't eat into the shuttle bay too much just by having like a lump there. I don't think we'd need much room for it. And to be honest, that could even go all the way down into the cargo hold underneath as well. Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to Claire the other day actually about at what point do we start putting this out as a dev build. Obviously, anyone who's an Admiral level backer has a lifetime content pass anyway, so obviously they already have access to it. So I'll find a way of sticking it in a dev build accordingly. We might need to do a bit of a collection of Steam IDs so that we can gate access via Steam ID, and then it will just come up in the game normally. If you are logged in with a Steam ID that's on the list, then it will just let you in and you can play it. Right. So yes, I will have a door there for engineering, and yes, we will have a lift here, but we'll also have a cargo lift for the shuttle bay, because obviously the the rest of the ship's also going to have stuff that's stored there. Or just trying to get my head around how what is the most optimal way of getting cargo out of the cargo hold here to the rest of the ship where it's needed. Now, if it's going into engineering, then we can have a secure engineering door there, and obviously on the other side of this wall there's an engineering lift, so that solves that easily. But for the rest of the crew, they would have to take a cargo lift down there, load it up, and then bring it back up to the shuttle bay in order for it to be like moved on. So it's really, with the space we've got, that's the only practical solution. And then if we were going to do an engineering lift, and we can move those stairs over a bit, because they don't necessarily need to be against the back wall. See, if I made them a bit steeper, they could actually go between the doors there. And then the lift is not taking up quite as much room there. Because they're quite a shallow stair, so we could actually squidge them in a little bit. Yes, Flying Fortress, the key you've got is the same key that captains have. Yeah, the issue with the lift though is it has to go all the way up, and on deck 2, there's other stuff above that corridor, which is going to get in the way of it. I think my favourite way... see, I was going to say my favourite way of doing this is to move the stairs over, but we're also going to have a lot of stuff coming out the reactor as well. So we need to have like conduit space for some pretty chunky cabling that's going to come out of there. This is the fun part, like designing where all the cable runs are going to go. Yeah, I could always move the stair. So if I were to create a bit of an alcove there, move the stairs into them, just to basically widen the stairwell slightly, then yes, as long as there's like enough room between the stairs and the lift, I could then put the lift here, and then we could use the lift space for some of the cabling. That's not uncommon in buildings. They use lift shafts for cable and pipes and things. It wouldn't be an enclosed lift anyway, it would just be a moving platform. Why don't we do some of the cabling and the stuff from the reactor so that we know kind of roughly what we're dealing with space-wise? Because I have basically angled so these engine pods are all angled in such a way that if you were to draw a straight line through the middle of them, they all meet right in the dead center, and the dead center is approximately where the reactor is. Now obviously we don't necessarily have room for running cables straight up to the engines. They're going to have to go over doors and things. But I do think that the engineering stairwell should be gantries rather than solid floors, so we'll have literal gaps all the way around, because we need that wall space for running stuff up and down. Let's give that a try actually. Let's just riff with that for a minute. So there's our wall. So right now we've got a distance of 35, I think, for that. Yeah, so if we were to have essentially fresh air all the way around the gantries, and then we make sure that the gantries are of sufficient width. If we make them all 2 meters, there's plenty of room for that. So that one's 2, which means that one can be 2 as well. Not sure why there's an extra face there, that's weird. We can move that over a bit. Let's make that a separate group. Ladders, yeah. Yeah, we're not having ladders. 2 reasons. 1, because it makes NPC movement a nightmare. And 2, because ladders are not conducive to carrying heavy stuff. Just from a purely practical perspective. You can't lug things up a ladder. So if we have all that hollow space around there, and then we can, to make it somewhat nicer, we can just round off these corners. Actually, how long is that? 45. So if we say, I guess 30 for the corners. Something like that. So I've gone with pretty big 2-meter wide doorways all the way around, which isn't necessarily needed. You could maybe make the doorways a little bit smaller. So if we were to have a lift here, then we take our midpoint. That doesn't necessarily look like the midpoint for some reason. 580, it is the midpoint. Yeah, alright. So we'd want the lift car, I would say, just looking at the length of my desk, yeah, let's say about 1.5 meters, so maybe about that. Maybe as a rectangle, so 3 meters, oops, no, not 3 centimeters, 3 meters. So maybe something like that. So that's 3 meters wide by 1.5 meters deep. Then have that as a moving platform. Let's see, bring that out. At least 5 as a minimum because of the framing. And then maybe another 20. Just to give us some clearance for the mechanism that will be ultimately moving it up and down. Yes, but at some point we can move to actual hair strands rather than just a texture, with a normal map, which would be very nice. If we let's grab that a minute. So assuming no room for clearance, so assuming it's just a flush fit with the lift, then we need to move over 200 in order to provide our 2 meter walkway there. Which means the stairs would have to go over there. So really, in real terms, we're not actually eating into the shuttle bay much at all. I mean, how much is that? That's 0.5 meter. And that's a tiny amount of space, really. So just a little bit of a bulge there in the middle of the shuttle bay. That's totally doable. And it gives us room for a cargo lift there, 2 meters of walkway there. Yeah, I think we can make that work. And then obviously that's engineering rooms either side. Okay, yeah, so that's the stairs down into that engine pod. So they'll be going down there. So we'll have a secure door there into the cargo hold, and then we'll have our cargo lift where the door is now. Just move the door out of the way, and that should solve that problem. already on deck 2, so... Yeah, we've already got a hard bulkhead here. So yeah, that lift can indeed go all the way up as far as the main batteries in the back there. Okay. We have plans. That was always the plan, astronauts. So our main inspiration for the NPC crew is sort of like Dwarf Fortress / RimWorld, so that the NPC crew are ever present. They have their own thoughts and personalities. They have their own assigned crew quarters, and they're always there. They're always present on the ship. So when an NPC walks off and walks around the corner, they're not just disappearing and despawning. They will continue their journey to wherever it is they're going. So I want the ability to be able to just stalk an NPC all day long and watch them as they go about their business. You know, they'll do their shift, and when their shift ends, they'll go and get some food, and then they'll take themselves off to their crew quarters, eventually go to sleep, and you'll be able to just walk with them and watch them go through their routine as they do it. And it will sort of dynamically evolve with, as we add like their mental health state and that sort of thing. You know, as they're walking through damaged parts of the ship, then, you know, being surrounded by damaged ship is going to reduce their mental state, so that will make them perform less efficiently. So the whole thing is one like big dynamic system that all kind of, everything affects everything else essentially. Yeah, we've had a few questions about romancing the NPCs. If that ever happens, then obviously we want to keep the game PG as much as we can. It will have a teen rating because we've got things like alcohol and stuff in the game, and probably like smoking and drug use, you know, alien plants making you high, that sort of thing. So yeah, I expect it to have a teen rating, but you know, we don't want anything weird and creepy, so don't expect anything more than like blurred scenes that you see in The Sims. We've already had people suggesting some pretty weird and creepy stuff, so we want to avoid that where possible. Yeah, Stalking Simulator is kind of what I coined it a while ago, but that's what I want. You know, I want to create a stalking simulator when it comes to the NPCs. Someone's probably just snipped that and will now use it against me. Dan says he wants to create a stalking simulator. so I'm going to make this main stairwell area just a completely empty shaft that runs all the way up through engineering, and then we'll build the gantry for the stairs that goes up. It's probably the easiest way to do it, and then it's pretty much the same as what we've done on the Magellan as well. Which means we'll need to do the same with that. So we just grab a copy of that edge, copy that, get rid of that, get rid of that. In there. Realise these need to go all the way across that frame actually, so they go all the way to there. These are our longitudinal support beams. So this is basically the framing design for the ship's hull. We've got these longitudinal beams that go down the length of the ship, and then we've got these horizontal supports, which I'll thicken into 1-inch thick sheets at some point. And obviously that's our top frame. And I need to do that on every single deck. I wanted to be an architect when I was growing up, and then I went into IT instead and just ended up being an IT manager. But my sister's an architect, so it must kind of run in the blood. So this is just, this is just a hobby. But yes, this is definitely not my first Starship. Right, so that's the bottom, that's our doorway. That's that, and those are... Wait, have we lost our... Oh, we have lost our bottom one there. Right. Sigh. So I'm just going to re-extrude that because I lost the bottom face, and it's easier just to re-extrude than it is to try and fix the bottom face. And then all of these beams are 1 inch too high, because once we take into account the thickness of the sheet metal, they will be protruding through. Now we put the sheet on top. These beams aren't protruding. Just those lateral ones, which I shall fix at another time. Probably easier. If I just borrow those, and the deck 3 one should be largely similar. Actually, I've already got some in there. So that one needs to be of a higher density. So we'll line up with that one. Line that one up with that one. That's more like it. Grab our inner edge again so that we make sure that our cavity is exactly the same size. Just pop that up on top of this one. So the difference on this level is we've got overlapping framework blocks that we didn't have down here. So the framework here just needs to be subtly different. So these are too high as well. Oh, these ones I can fix. If they've got a curved edge to them, I can't lower them down easily, but these ones are alright, I can. So they should be the exact height we need for the top sheet. So to answer again the earlier question of how long is this all going to take, it's this kind of stuff which just takes time. All these little fiddly framework bits and lining things up and making sure that like stairs properly line up with the stairs above, and there's lots and lots of just little fiddly bits that need doing. But the upside of that, obviously, is that you end up with a lot more of a physically accurate vessel that actually has some real engineering standards, and you know, not only does it look good, it also makes sense physically. Yeah, one minor oversight, or kind of design necessity really, is that this is how big our doors are, and this is how big our panels are. And there's no way that panel is going through that door. And that's probably one of our biggest doors on the ship. So the issue we're going to have is, like, if this ship were real, there's no way you could move these panels anywhere. You know, you could put them in situ whilst the ship was being built, but then you can't do anything else with them. So in order to get around that fact in the game, when you take a panel off of the wall, it will just turn into a box, and it will just have like wall panel kit written on the box. Because, and for another reason, is that every single panel is different. So like, you know, obviously this panel is different from this panel, which is different from this panel, which is different from this one because it's got a screen frame in it, you know, and different from this little one here. With all these different panels, we don't want the player to have to print out like the specific panel, because as much as that's just a blank curved panel, like that is also a blank curved panel, and somewhere here there's probably another blank curved panel. So, you know, how do you know which curved panel you're printing out? Like that one with a window or that one with a window. There are so many different panels. In the hundreds, there are hundreds of unique panels. So to make the job easier, you will just have a wall panel crate, and then when you use that wall panel crate on the gap that would be there, so let's just say that panel's been removed, so now we're missing a panel in this corridor, you would use the panel crate on that gap, and then it would just create the correct panel to go in that space, just to make life easier, because otherwise it would be all kinds of nightmarish, horrendous sort of having to memorize numbers or panel IDs or something. Yeah, so just generic panel kit fills any hole on the ship. Although, that said, if we go down the road of having to replace panels one by one, if you want to change the interior styling of the ship, then maybe we could have different types of panel crates for different styles of panel. So like the one up here with the wooden trim is very different from the one down in engineering, which doesn't have the wooden trim and has the angled edges and such. So maybe you'd have to print out the engineering style one in particular rather than, you know, the habitation style one. Same size hole, same curvature, but a completely different visual style of panel. But we'll ruminate on that some more, you know, once we actually have that gameplay, and we'll look at whether or not we want customization of the ship to be physical customization where you rip off panels and replace them with new ones, or whether it's just a ship-wide, I want these panels on this deck, and it just does it for you. We shall probably let the community decide on which they prefer with that one. Yeah, something like that, Jason. Like the panels are bendy, so you can like just bend them. That's true, Festus. Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to do that if it adds depth to gameplay. I'm all for anything really that adds depth to gameplay. We want all the depth. We need to adjust our hole a little bit here to match the dimensions of the one underneath, just allowing for our usual 2-inch overhang. And the reason we give it a 2-inch overhang is because we've got like little bracing bits that go in there, and the things which hold the brackets for the wall panels stick out 5 centimeters, so we always give it that little lip so that we can have room to put our brackets and such. Okay, so we should have a fairly consistent, complete vertical shaft going up there now. I imagine, yeah, that Oh, that doesn't even have a ceiling, so that needs doing. And then that one needs cutting out too. Okay. Grab that edge again. Oh, that's bright. No. Yeah, the 3D printers, they are connected to like big tanks that have the actual print material, so it's not really something that's going to be very mobile. Yeah, teleportation has no valid science paper surrounding it. I mean, everything that we are including in the game has some kind of scientific plausibility. I mean, if not scientific fact, then at least scientific plausibility. And I've yet to see anything related to teleportation that is in any way plausible. It's just one of those technologies which is just way out there. We're missing a layer here somewhere. I'm sure that had a ceiling. I guess not. Unless I accidentally deleted it at some point. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. I'm just going to take a copy of that one bit, delete the rest. And then we will extrude that one face. Saves messing about. Then we'll have to chop this where it protrudes through the hull. Just maybe move it to there for now. this might actually be a little bit too low. Or this one's the only one that's right. So that's 250. That's exactly 2.5 meters there. Ah, yes, of course. So that does need to come up 1 inch. Because the space from there to the floor is 2.5 meters. So our actual headroom on the deck is 2.5 meters. So that works. Making sure I've got the right bits here, because I think, yeah, that one's, yeah, that's a split frame, and that one isn't, so yeah, so we need that version of it. Should be right, except these guys need to go all the way across. Why did we lose the engineering floor? Right, so there is our stairwell shaft and also lift shaft. I'll sort that extension out in a sec. Can sort these out because these are way too wide. It should be as wide as this one. Yeah, 2 meters standard door size. Okay, good. Right, so the next job there now is just to build up a gantry that goes up the middle, and then include space for a lift against that wall. If you're talking about the Magellan, the data center is accessible from C-Deck. There is a door. Well, there's nothing in there yet, it's an empty room. Thanks. Yeah, you can never have enough lifts. Right, so we move that door over there out the way. Yeah, then we'd have some form of lift car going up there. So we'll have like a magnetic track or something going up the wall. That at least gives us a clear way of getting all of our cargo to every single deck of engineering, which is needed. Yeah, then in the reactor room, let's get rid of those bits a minute. Yeah, I've got no top bit for this one either, actually. So let's just create that real quick. I'm just going to steal that bit. There, and that will just stick out for a minute. Just gives us our internal ceiling. So we should have a full ceiling in there now. Yep. Okay. Yeah, it's construction tape. There will be force fields in the game, but only in very specific use cases. So, like the doors will have a force field for the shuttle bay, which will be kind of, as the doors open, the edge of the door will probably create the force field, or we'll have it slightly inside of the doors. Either way, there will be a force field on the shuttle bay, purely because of practicalities and convenience. And if we ever have a surface-mounted landing bay, like on the Magellan, there'll be a force field covering that too. That aside, other than the ship's main shielding, we won't have force fields like along corridors like you see in Star Trek. They are not designed for that purpose. They're also like non-Newtonian fluid as well, so if you were to just slowly move through them, then you could push your way through. Although, given how we're making the shields, which is to use the same mass-energy equivalence equation, the amount of energy you'd need to put into the plasma to create something akin to non-Newtonian fluid, it is going to be so much energy you would not want to touch it. That would fry you to a crisp. So before I look at where the lift car is going to run, we still need to look at what we're doing with the cabling from the reactor. I suppose. So these doors, that's where. Sorry, no, not those doors. So that stairwell, and the equivalent that will be down there. That's where all of these cables need to go through. So we'll have, I guess using this one as an example because it's actually there, we'll have like a hole in the wall here, and that's where all the cables are going to go through, which means they need to go down through, I guess, through this wall, which is going to be right in that midpoint there, and then down. So I suppose, I guess if we have the cables coming out in a cross pattern there, then they can go through the wall, like here, 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 and here. And these ones are going to have to run up and over the door, whereas these ones are going to have to run down. It's down like that. Which is why we need to have a kind of a floating gantry rather than like solid floors, because there's going to be a lot of stuff running up and down here, I expect. let's move that over a bit. Say 3 meters. Yeah, just like that. So those are the 4 main power cables for the FTL, and we'll have parallel ones for the engines as well. Probably just have them running next to each other. So if those are the points where they're coming out, then the lift's going to have to go up between them. Doesn't seem safe, does it? The amount of voltage we're going to be pushing down these cables, running above your head as you walk through the door. That prepare for arcing. I guess there's going to be a slight difference in the way it's handled on a per deck basis, because if we're targeting the same point, I suppose if we target it at the middle, at the absolute mid plane. Hang on, let's give that a try a minute. So the middle of the door. Actually, no, we don't want the middle of the door, do we? We want the middle of the deck. So from there to there. Actually, no, that wouldn't be the middle of the deck though, would it? So there to there. Yeah, and then the middle. Weird, why is it doing that? sure why that's doing that. Must be something to do with the angle. So surely if we rotate that by 180 from the middle, it should be absolutely equal on the other side. Yeah, there we go, that's better. Right, so the question is, if that to there is about 150 centimeters, then that to there should be 150 as well, which it is. Okay, so that's completely equal, which means where that cable runs down the stairs should be the same height as the cable running up the stairs on this side. Just look a bit low, to be fair. It's kind of at floor level. Does that mean it's at head level? No, of course. So yeah, so what would be head level on this one would naturally be floor level on the deck above. Oh yeah, our corn snake, she will not stay still. Like if you pick her up and just try and wrap her around your neck or something, she'll just be all over the place. Like she doesn't stop for a second. She'll be up your arm, through your clothes, then you're having to like drag her out your sleeve. She just, yeah, she just doesn't sit. I wanted a snake that I could just sit with, and I could be working away and I just have a little snake snoozing on my shoulder. But yeah, that is not the snake we ended up with. Yeah, so I think when I measure this properly, once we've got the stairs in, I'm going to make it so that the cabling runs like through the wall at the midpoint. Too many decks of stuff. Which means it's going to be slightly different up above and below. Like, I'm trying to keep it as symmetrical as I can, but I don't think it's going to be. So it can come through the wall in the same spot. So obviously head height on this deck, sort of knee height on this deck, which is middle as far as the middle of the ship is concerned. But then I'll have it track so that it goes, I suppose, yeah, diagonally up from there. Oop. No, didn't want to do that. Yeah, so if we have the cable go up diagonally to the interdeck cavity, just measure that out. Yeah, so it would come up to there. And then we'd run the cable connect with the wall. Yeah, so we run the cable down above the door frame in that cavity, and then the same down there, and then around the wall. Yeah, and around the wall to there, and then it would come up, and then up the stairs, like that. Yeah, so that one would go around like that, same on the other side, and then this one down here would have to do the same thing but on this wall instead. So we grab the middle of the frame again. So we want to do that, 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 that. Let's get rid of all these guides a sec. And then this one would come down again to the midpoint, and then we'd go diagonally down here somewhere, like that. Yeah, so that would have to be where we route the main cabling. I guess the convenient part here is this is a wall. So actually we could run up around the wall. That might be easier. And the same on this side. Come on, there we go. Ah, see, this one's less easy because there's a door. If there wasn't a door there, we could just come down and across, as we can here. So here we can go up and across quite happily, and we can on this side. So if there was a door in the middle, then that would make that really easy. But that's where we're going to put the lift, so not so easy. Yeah, that's going to have to just come round and above the door. It's awkward. We don't need a door, do we? Where else can I put a door? Yeah, that's just wandering GPS. It does that quite a lot. Yeah, Claire's daughter was going to come over and do some painting, but I assume that's what it was. I guess not. Why is that not creating a face? Do I have nothing at the other end? No, I do have something at the other end. Weird. Right, okay, this is going to be a case of hunt the bit of geometry that's not in the right place. Ah, that would be the problem. Alright, fine, I'll check my phone to see who it was. I wonder if it was my son going out skateboarding. Maybe. No, it was actually Claire, apparently. So apparently Claire left and then came back again. And I have 4% battery, so that's going to die in a minute. It was you, it says. GPS says it was you. So I don't know where you went, but according to my phone, you left and came back. Oh, the other Claire. Ah, of course. It's funny, about a month or so ago, because Life 360 was showing Claire in someone else's house, and it was showing her there all day, but I knew where she was, so she definitely wasn't there. But yeah, according to my phone, she was just sat in someone else's house all day. It's going to be a slightly awkward one, this, because you've got this complex curve coming down here, so I'm going to have to straighten those walls across. Right, if we grab... Let's get rid of that for a minute. Yeah, if we grab that and that, and them, oh, yeah, one on there as well. That's our frame pattern, so we'll use that just as our guide. so that one and that one are not needed. Yeah, we're going to have to chop this into, maybe chop the middle out and call that top. Again, when we're drawing deck plans, we want to be able to do a top-down view of deck 1, so we need to be able to reveal that part of it, which means we're going to have to chop these vertically up here and separate that as a separate layer, because right now it's just classed as the walls when it's not technically walls. Right, and then that would go up to there. Yeah, so we'll have a cavity behind the walls, although that having been said, we might be able to extend that out a little bit. We'll see whether we need to stuff anything behind the wall or not. But that essentially creates the wall there where we're going to put the door. Same that side. Borrow this one just so we can do that without having to redraw it. Okay, so there's our door up the stairs. Seem to have miscalculated that a little bit, so that should be 10 centimeters lower. And it should also actually step back, shouldn't it? So yeah, we don't want the steps to start until after the second frame. We'll look into that. And we don't have much wiggle room though, so could be awkward. Might need to steepen the stairs a bit there, just to avoid the frame, because that's already very much hugging the frame. In fact, it's exactly hugging the frame. Interesting, because the one down there didn't do that, so I shall have to rethink that slightly. I mean, slightly steeper stairs is the obvious answer, but can't really... Well, unless I eat into the frame slightly. It's a problem for another day, I think. How loud is the fish tank? Is it like annoyingly loud? Oh, not terrible then. It's actually a shrimp tank. It's very tiny. It's only about probably not even 5 litres. It's quite small, but I've got about 10, 11 little shrimp in it. They're my desk buddies. It doesn't have a normal filter. It just has one of those little like bubble-driven sponge filter things, which the shrimps love. But it is literally right underneath the microphone, so I can understand why it's picking it up. Right, so from there to the floor should be 2.5 meters, which it is exactly. Huzzah. And so if we put them in that group, because technically they're all part of that, that kind of completes our stairwell shaft, and then we need, then we need the top section, which is what I'm going to have to cut this out for. It's going to be bit awkward, but let's see what we can do with it. So that's basically forming one end of either the science labs or a meeting room, depending on which one I put in front of the other. And obviously on the other side of that wall is the engineering stairwell, which now has a lid. So yeah, that's now complete. And then we've got the battery room at the back, and that's going to be formed by this back section, depending on how much room we have. Okay, yeah, so that's a separate piece, which means those ones actually extend out all the way to there. So if we grab this a minute. That would come out to there. Plus a bit more. So where's our join line? It's there. Same with that one. Comes out to there. Which means the distance from there to the other side of that should be 20, which it is. And the same with this one. That can come out the same distance. And I suppose while we're at it, that can come out as well. Right, so that forms the front half of the battery room, and then the rear half is what's contained within the curved bit of the back. Most of these squiggly framework bits, they'll just be made solid, so we'll have some lightning holes cut in them, but they'll just be solid all the way across. So if we drag that way, stick that on there. Okay, we'll have a fair amount of room. We'll probably just keep the tapered ceiling. I like when you're in a ship and the walls aren't all straight, because if you're in that room and you're seeing the ceiling taper down as you're in the room, then you have a real sense of the fact that, oh, I'm at the back of the ship. I can see the contour of the outer hull from within the room. Because the only other way of doing that would be just to put a flat wall across before the slope, and just make the room square. But I like the idea of actually seeing the curvature on the inside. Just close up these door holes a minute. Hold there. Why are you there? Actually, rather than intersecting with the model, what I'll do is I'll grab that inner face, pop that in there, and if we make that a component, move it out the way a bit. Give us a fairly decent cut through there. Let me just get rid of that bit. Yeah, that'll do. Right, now we have our sloping walls. Obviously there's going to be a framework in here as well, so and that will be up in the ceiling. So as that comes down, we'll probably smooth that off more. Oh, of course, yeah, because that's just the outer skin. We'll have the inner skin as well, so that will come up in a smooth curve. For now, I think if I just take a copy of that, we can literally just drag that out. So the plan here on the back, this is going to house all of the batteries for the ship. and we'll have kind of like heat sinks at the back there. So you'll see some greebly detail at the back where all that is. And again, with the design of all the things we're doing, all the ships and all the technology, we want the hardware to be literally one-to-one with the outer hull. So we're not just going to put a generic greebly detail on the back of the hull here. The heat sinks will be connected to the actual battery units. So there's a one-to-one relationship between the detail on the outside and what's happening on the inside hardware-wise. So, yes, so the original Magellan was going to look more like this. It was kind of a squished, flattened version of this with kind of flattened rings. And we ended up going with a saucer design, a literal saucer, because it was the easiest way to pack 200 crew quarters into the smallest amount of space. Just with having a tubular ship, it was just getting longer and longer and longer the more crew quarters we were trying to fit into it. And as we were expanding sideways to try and make more corridors for more crew quarters, it became obvious that with 200 crew quarters, just put them all in a circle, pack them together, and the saucer design just works. And I was also looking at some research into real-world Alcubierre drives and that sort of thing, and someone was saying that a frisbee is actually the most efficient shape for an FTL ship. And I was reading that roughly the same time as we were doing the crew quarters, so it just made complete sense to just make it a saucer. And then of course, we didn't want, I guess with the way I was doing it, it ended up looking like a Miranda class. And we thought, we can't have it looking like a Miranda class, as cool as they are, because, CBS and all. So we thought, okay, so we can't make it look like a Miranda. Let's stretch the back, and it ended up kind of being toilet seat shaped. And I was fairly happy with that, and we were going to go with that as our final design for a long time. But then when it came to actually building a physical FTL ring, or FTL hardware, I couldn't reconcile, like, a toilet seat shape with fitting an FTL ring round it, and everything I tried either ended up looking like a Miranda class or it just looked stupid. So in the end, we then stretched it out into kind of like a fish shape, which made the ring fit a lot more sort of aesthetically pleasing to the size of the ship. So the Magellan class as it currently stands is kind of 3-4 years of constant iteration and trying to make things fit as best as possible, whereas the Caravella class here, that's more of a design from scratch with all those lessons having been learned already. So yeah, that's kind of the design journey with both of them. When we make the Pathfinder class, which is the Magellan's successor, it's going to be more in the lines of the Caravella. So if you imagine a much, much bigger version of the Caravella with probably still having a ring at the back, although with a split ring. So with the way we're developing the tech within the game, the very first FTL ships have a full ring for their Alcubierre drives. But as the technology progresses and as lessons are learned and new things are discovered, we're going to have it so that you don't need a full ring. You can just have like a banana shape each side of the ship, and you can achieve the same FTL performance without needing the entire ring. So I guess you could like look at it as nacelles rotated 90 degrees, but kind of like curved. So they're still forming the curve of what would be a sphere, but just without the top and the bottom, which allows the ships to be a lot sleeker and smoother, and yeah, so it's just a bigger, sexier version of this basically. Oh, well done, Don. My son is 18 in about a week, so yeah, big birthday indeed. Congratulations to your daughter. I have the dubious pleasure this coming weekend of actually walking up to a bar with my son and having him order his first drink and using his ID. So that'll be interesting. Talk about making you feel old. Can't believe I have an 18-year-old son. Mad. True. It is also my birthday. Yes. My birthday is the day before. It was almost on the same day by about an hour. Right, so that was deck 1 frame top, so we need a new group for that. Deck 1 frame top. And then, yeah, that's also deck 1 frame top. There's a deck 1 frame walls. There we go, just keeps it all organised. I may as well do the door while I'm here. Stairs are coming up that side. Yeah, we'll stick the door on this side. Oh, congrats, Caesar. That's great. Can't see any of ours getting married anytime soon. The way the command structure is going to work for department heads is that they will have the additional ability to assign tasks to people via the tasks board. Now normally the task board will just assign tasks randomly, or the NPCs can just come and kind of cherry pick which task they're doing, as can the player. But the only additional ability a department head will have is the ability to then just manually assign a task to a person. That's it really. Other than that, they'll just be doing tasks alongside the rest of the crew. Right. Okay, so we've got our door into the battery room. The battery room now has walls and a ceiling. Okay, so we've got our stairwell gantry to build up there. Right, let's get that all turned back on again. Okay, so we know where the reactor cabling can go. I'd love to find another place to put a door for that room. Ooh, I wonder... No, it's too far down, isn't it? I was thinking if it's by that corridor, I could use that, but no, that's the outer hull, so that's not going to work. There's nothing on the other side either. I think we're stuck with the door where it is. Well, actually, no, I say that. So one of the things we need that we don't have yet is we don't have any of the fuel scoop hardware. So the fuel scoop hardware is going to go underneath here. Now, if we drop the main stairwell down one extra deck and make a 5th deck, which is literally just a bump underneath, then we can put the fuel scoop hardware at the front of it and then make the fuel tank room 2 decks tall rather than just the one. Yeah, because that's there. Which wall am I stuck in? Yeah, so there's the reactors. The fuel tanks are underneath. And right now, they're a little bit small and pathetic. So if I was to make this a double height room, then we could have much bigger tanks that make a lot more sense, along with their hardware. And then we don't need that corridor there anymore. Yeah. I'll try and make it as streamlined as possible. We don't want it to be the full width, I don't think. Let's try it a sec and see what it looks like. So if we take... Where's the walls? Yeah, it's gonna have to... We'll have to round that off a bit, I think, at the bottom there. Because it's going to have to be the same width as this. So that would go down 300. Yeah, so it's only actually hanging down that much, which isn't terrible. But it does mean I'm going to have to do a bit of jiggery pokery there where it connects to the thing, or oh no, it's going to have to actually, because we need the width on this room. So yeah, right, well that doesn't need to be that big, does it? So what we can do is we can maybe angle that wall in just to make it look a bit nicer. So they need to go. Suppose to about there. And then we'll angle them. Oh wait, is that a component? Yes it is. Alright. Do this a different way. So copy that, get rid of it, make that unique. In there. Right, now we can do it without messing it up. Yeah, so it only needs to go back that far really. So we can blend that into there, which is going to be a little bit tricksy, but I'm sure we can do it. Yeah, we'll make that an angle anyway, which won't matter at the bottom of the stairs as long as we're not eating into the amount of space we have here for the landing area. Could always make maybe a slightly steeper stairwell at the very bottom part, because it is just literally access to an equipment room. And then, yeah, so that would form part of that framework block. And then we'd have another one there. That would need to go to there. No, there. Sorry, my phone's been really musical today. Hang on, Claire says it's not her. Let's double check. $22.57. Claire left Claire's house. Claire's battery is at 10%. Yes. See, evidence. It's Claire. It's about to die. I'll turn it off. Right, so if we're going with a deck 5, access to which will only be via that stairwell, we'll have to bring these walls in. I suppose, actually, because we're going with maybe a steeper stairwell, we can bring the walls in a bit, so they don't need to be the full width, which means we can reconcile it slightly with what's going on here, and we'll just take that into account as we go up, maybe, because then it depends on what we're doing with the fuel tanks. Because if we were to make them bigger, then we could fit quite a few tanks in there vertically and bigger, and then that wall wouldn't need to be there, and then that wall could go back to there, which means this would be the engineering control room. But the issue with that is that the engineering control room is then on an entirely different deck to the rest of engineering. So they'd have to like go up the stairs and round to get to it, which is less than ideal. So we could maybe move the fuel tanks forward, but I don't want too much of a lump underneath the ship. Like, it definitely needs to come in a smooth curve, and then we'll just have our fuel scoop will be mounted pretty much there underneath. Right, how much space do we have? Where are we? I think what I would be more inclined to do in this situation would be to make the engineering office up on deck 3 with windows overlooking the reactor, which means I get what I wanted with that, because I really wanted the engineering office to see the reactor from the office. And then we have these 2 crew quarters, which we can just drop down to the deck below. So you just have 2 crew quarters here. It's kind of like overflow quarters, either for engineers or maybe whoever's working in hydroponics. Because that then puts the engineering office exactly where it needs to be, which means we don't need this door here anymore, or that one. All them, to be honest. I know we will need those. Yeah, so if we take that out, pop that in there. They need making 150 rather than 2 meters. Just center those on the room. It doesn't help because for some reason this is in multiple pieces. One done. Oh, this one's in multiple pieces as well. Can't center it if it's multiple bits. going to have to flatten the hull a bit there because it's starting to go up in a curve. And I'm assuming the height difference between there and there is minimal. Yeah, 1.2 centimeters. So what I'll do is I'll flatten this down a bit so that the curve kind of goes to there, which means that'll be perfectly flat for the door frame. Okay, so what we end up with then is on deck 4 we have hydroponics, the main stairwell, and 2 crew quarters. And then up on deck 3 we end up with the actual engineering office with its windows overlooking the reactor, and then we don't need a door here. I bet that was a component, wasn't it? Did I just like block off? Oh no, I didn't. Yes, I did. Making sure I'm not breaking anything else on the ship. Right, so what that means is the engineering corridor then accesses the engineering stairwell and it accesses the engineering office, which is basically engineering control, and where the chief engineer would generally sit and spend most of his time. And then we've just got the crew pass through from the shuttle bay, which goes down there. So all of that then becomes engineering, which is nice because that gives us direct access now straight into the engineering stairwell, without having to walk through any equipment rooms, which gets my vote. Approximate placement for now. There we go. Now the chief engineer can keep an eye on the reactor. And because those are all components, of course it's put a window where we don't want one. Let's copy that. Do that. Make that unique. Put that back. There. Now we don't have windows in the crew quarters. Yeah, I think the only way, or rather the only thing I could improve with this is if the engineering offices were on the upper floor, looking down over engineering, main reactor. But I think that's fine, because otherwise we would have to be messing with a lot of stuff to fit it all in. Because then we've got obviously the other two crew quarters, which we don't want to get rid of, because that's much more in keeping with the deck that they're on. Right, so therefore we need a door here. Give ourselves a marker. Right, so the middle is there, actually. Save ourselves some hassle, we can cheat. That works. Good night, CSI. Have a good one. It's going to be a busy old stairwell, this. There's a lot of doors coming off of it. But most importantly, if we can close off this doorway here, that gives us the space we need now in order to route the power cables and such from the reactor straight across the wall and through the wall down into the engine supports without a door being in the way. And then access to the coolant and fuel room will have to be underneath. So we'll have to narrow this. Yeah, we're going to have to narrow it because of the curve and everything. It's going to be awkward. Question is, how much do we narrow it by, and then how much do we curve that by? I don't want an unsightly lump under the ship. It kind of needs to look smooth and part of the design. But yeah, so that aside, I think that all works better. We get extra stairs going down, we get a 5th deck, we remove the doors from that wall, it means we get to have a double height fuel and coolant room, we get our engineering offices on the same level as the reactor, we got our own dedicated engineering corridor. So yeah, I think on the whole, that all works out nicely. And we're still keeping the main crew access separate from the rest of the ship. We could we could have the stairs maybe going straight under. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Although, I suppose we could do with the lift going all the way to the bottom, because there might be some components and bits and pieces, stacks, pipes and stuff you might need to take down to fix stuff. So we'll have the lift go all the way down to the 5th deck. It's funny how, like, most of the ship is just like engineering systems and crew quarters. So you've got a bunch of crew quarters and a bunch of engineering stuff. There's not a lot else. The offices and the actual sciencey stuff is such a small amount of the vessel, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Yeah, you're right. It's I guess the same is true with real world ships as well. Most of the boat is for running the boat. I suppose cargo vessels are different, but yeah, there's a lot of ship to a ship. So, out of interest then, how big do we want our cabling to be? That's way too many edges. Probably make them a bit chunkier actually. Let's grab Bryce because he's our scale reference. So we need the power cables to be, big enough to be believable, but not so big that they're ridiculous. I'm guessing twice that size probably. I should have made that a component really, shouldn't I? So that would be a 1/2 meter wide cable. Yeah, I think that's probably, like for the FTL supply, maybe something like that. Like a very, very heavily shielded electrical cable with like warning labels all over it. Looks a bit more robust. Yeah, they do tend to do that, don't they? So I guess what I would do with this. So obviously this is super like rough and just to kind of prove a point. So we'd probably have that coming down like this. To say maybe halfway along the door frame. And then through the wall. So that's where it would start going up. Or down in this case. Oh yeah, of course. Of course, they're mirrored, aren't they? Mirror, where are you? Ah, flip. I added that to the wrong one. Yeah, I did. something like that. So we've got a nice symmetrical layout of all the various power feeds, and these will be multiple feeds as well, because they're not just feeding the FTL rings, obviously they're also feeding the engines and the RCS, so we're going to have multiple cables coming out and going in various directions. So those will be the main ones for the really, really high voltage stuff. Then we'll have to have some running, I guess, up alongside the lift, going up to the battery banks, and running in a bunch of other places as well. The coolant and fuel for the reactor are obviously under the floor, right here. So I think the pipes for them will come up the back wall. So we'll have them come up around here somewhere. We might actually, yeah, if we bring that in by about a meter. See if we can line that up with the end cap there. Right, so we'll actually have the reactor be slightly shorter to give us space on either side of it. So we'll have like, I guess like a distribution cap on one end, which distributes the output. And then we'll have all the fuel and coolant coming in the other end. So fuel and coolant go in one end, power comes out the other. Probably move that over to be closer to the stairs actually. Just so it's, because while standing on the stairs you want to be able to reach it. So yeah, I'll probably have it curve around like that. Okay, so if we're doing that with them, then we'll probably go up. I had the top bit on. Yeah, I'll probably come up first. If we're taking the power up to the battery rooms. Oh, actually no, we'll have to come to the side because of the lift. So yeah, so we'll bring it through one side or the other and have that power come up and over. So obviously there's the battery room. So we'll have to have the power come up into either the ceiling cavity or, yeah, I suppose the ceiling cavity makes the most sense. So up and through the ceiling cavity and then down into the battery rooms. Yeah, the big red pipes are like the highest of high voltage cables for the reactor. For the FTL coils. That's the FTL power distribution, essentially. So this main stairwell in engineering is essentially going to turn into, I guess, a cable run. So like all the cables, everything is all going to be running up and down this stairwell. So you're kind of going to be amongst it all as you're traversing up and down. And then it will just sort of snake off into it, its various directions as to where it's needed. And then the output from the battery rooms, I'll have to come back, maybe back down the other side. I mean, there are no stairs on this side, so that can possibly be the wiring loom going down there, and it will break off into each deck. Yeah. This isn't just high voltage, this is the highest of high voltage. This is crap your pants voltage. Now we're going to need some distributors, obviously, to get this power where it's needed. And I imagine because of the size of the ship, we'll just do it per deck. So unlike the Magellan, where you've got like multiple quadrant distributors, this is going to be a simpler layout electrically, because it's just this. There's not much ship to do. So we'll just have probably 4 main distributors, or 5, given there's 5 decks now. Yeah, and we'll probably locate those within engineering. Or, like with a real boat, we'll have a unified frame, which is something I'm kind of planning at some point on the Magellan. Like in this room here, we could have our main electrical distribution frame at one end of the room, where we do all of the switching electrically, and then we'll just have small isolated breaker boxes around the ship, but like the main distribution happens within the office. I've noticed, I've never been like in the bowels of a ship to the engineering section, but from what I've seen in videos, there tends to be like engineering control panels, and then behind them it's just like a wall of electrical distribution, and it's all like in the engineering control room. So we'll do something similar along here. Yeah, at least 1.21 gigawatts. Yeah, you're right. The EM in this stairwell is going to be insane. But that's why we've got big, chunky, well-insulated cabling. That's true. I mean, the reactor is the deepest point it can be within the ship. So, you know, if you look at the layout of the ship, the reactor is the deepest point. It's very, very well protected. The batteries less so. The batteries are right on top at the back, but there's not really anywhere else to put them, so kind of limited there with what we can do. I mean, there's 2 things we don't have really. We don't have a computer room, like a computer core, on the ship anywhere yet. So we might need to make space for that somewhere. Yeah, we do have... See, we don't have a lot of space on deck 1, so we don't really have a conference room. Because the idea with deck 1 is that off of the main stairwell, you've got this space behind, which was going to be the science labs. But we might need to steal a bit of space from the science labs just to have a small conference room. And that is if we can't fit it on the front here. So I'm tempted we maybe move the bridge forward a little bit, because we've got all this space to use, so there's no reason why we can't move it forwards. And that does make room for a conference room at the back. Because we could move the bridge maybe just 5 to 10 meters forwards and still have the same general layout. And then there's more room for the science activities, because obviously, you know, this is ultimately a science vessel, and right now we have like the smallest amount of science lab space. We also don't have any refinery or anywhere to keep the ship running. We're going to have to squeeze our mining vehicle into the shuttle bay somewhere, and we might need to make the refinery in one of the side rooms, because we've got on deck 3. Is it deck 3? No, sorry, deck 2. So on deck 2 we've got these big rooms either side of engineering. So one was going to be life support, and we can combine life support with water recycling and that sort of thing. And the other side, we could potentially make that like a refinery area, but it's difficult to get to from the shuttle bay, which is kind of what you'd want. But yeah, we'll keep iterating on that and see. I mean, it might get to the point where we might need to add one more segment to the length of the ship, which is not the end of the world. If we're struggling to fit things in, we might not have any choice, but we shall see. Again, this is one of the fascinating things about designing ships like this, is when you actually have to care about the internal layout and the rooms and what rooms you have for the mission profile. It really does drive the size and scale of the ship, because you need all those rooms, you need all that equipment, and you need the space for the crew to be able to do their job. And of course the issue we have with that is that we only have a limited size crew. So there's only, I think, 14 people at the last count working on the ship, and it's already quite a big ship for 14 people, and it could easily support a bigger crew than that. But then where do we put them? Because then you add more crew quarters, and then the ship gets bigger. And then you need a bigger mess at the front because there's more crew. Everything affects everything else. Yeah, double bunking, to be honest, is not out of the question. But then these crew quarters, they're not huge. They are fairly small. Here's 2 that I hid earlier. Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, they're not huge, but you're right. It's probably big enough for double bunking. Yeah, because we could have 2 bunks adjacent along the back wall there, and then obviously a shared bathroom, and just have a bit of a seating area. It definitely might be the solution to our crew issue. And you've got the captain and XO with their apartments. I guess ultimately, this is a corporation vessel. Unlike the Magellan, it's not designed for long-term exploration of deep space. It's designed to go out there for a shorter length of time, in sort of quick scouting missions. So I suppose double bunking people isn't the end of the world. Yeah, exactly, Oni. Given that it's a corporation vessel, they're gonna limit comfort to some extent. You're not wrong, Jason. Yeah. Sure. Okay. I'll definitely look into that then, because I mean that bumps the crew up to 28, and 28 seems a lot more practical for a vessel of this size. Yeah, the science labs are going to have to be multidiscipline. So whereas the melon the melon has like a science lab for each discipline, this ship's going to have just one big multi-purpose lab which just handles everything. Again, because we're limited on physical space aboard the ship, so not much we can do about that. Yeah, we might add one more segment to the length, which would take it out to about there. I don't think that's gonna. It won't hurt the silhouette too much if we were to do that, and that would free up some space for like a computer room and that sort of thing, just to add those just extra rooms that we just don't have right now. But yeah, that aside, I think we're pretty much there. It's just doing the detail work now. I'm liking the arrangement of the pipes though. I think that works. Definitely gets us a good distribution area sorted. So the other thing we were doing, so if we were to do, let's say, a 2-meter lift, so the maximum it could come out, yeah, I had 150 before, so again, we'll do 3 meters. Probably about as close as you want the lift to be to those crazy voltages. So that's our lift. So it's already 0.5 away from there. So if we include like the railing and stuff within that footprint as well, and that can go up and down there. So let's start separating the stairs from each of those decks. Then that would be our gantry. Just run that over to there a sec. Same that side. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of, hopefully, a lot of hollow space that you can look up and down. It'd be cool if we made the floors mesh actually, so you can literally look up and down. That would give it a very strong engineering feel. And if we say no, that seems a bit small. Let's go for 40. So have little bridges of sorts going over. Actually, no, it's probably better to make that 30. Otherwise, we're going to run into issues over here. Well, actually, that's already 2 meters, isn't it? Yeah, so we could just get rid of that bit. And then that's going to have to be 2 meters to join up with that. That's going to have to be offset with that. Kind of awkward not having that door in a line, but how much do we have to reduce the lift by to make that line up? 25, I reckon we can do that. So if we were to reduce the lift by 25 centimeters, then we can then make this platform line up neatly with that, which just feels nicer. And really it's about how much radius do we need for the handrail to curve around. If we say 30 maybe, it might be enough, because that'll be curved, so the handrail's going to curve around there. We don't want it to be too sharp a curve, which actually means if we're doing that, then these stairs aren't actually protruding very far at all into the shuttle bay, which means we don't need to make that much of a sort of a detour on the wall. In fact, it's hardly at all. We'll have it come out a little bit, but yeah, I think it's barely needed. Okay, so that gives us a cargo lift, gantries, yeah, ways up and down. Yeah, we need one on this side as well. what's going on there. Yeah, I guess something like that. Let's give it a different color so that we can see what we're doing. And then that one, that color. So that distance should be equal, which it is. Oh, hey, Sockbox. Yes, Martin, they will be very much gantry style. Yeah, so the general arrangement on the UN ships is that the science crew are all civilians. So they're not actively serving in the military. The military are running the ship in the sense that the captain, the XO, some of the engineering crew, and certainly the security are all serving in the military. So it's a kind of 50-50. I guess kind of merchant navy-ish. But this particular ship, the Caravella, is going to be run by the corporation. So there'll be obviously a corporation employed captain. The security are probably ex-military, so they're being hired just as mercenaries, for want of a better word. And again, all the science crew are civilians working for the corporation. So there's nothing military about this ship at all. But UN ships are going to be a mix of both. The idea with the UN crews is that they're multinational. So the UN Security Council has basically people and resources put into it by its various member nations. So, you know, the ship itself might have been supplied by, you know, one of the member nations, and then the crew of that ship is made up of, you know, a number of different member nations that are all working together. So those crew will be serving in their own militaries normally, but on this particular assignment they're working, you know, in a multinational crew. After this mission's over, they'll go back to their own, you know, national militaries. So it's a bit of a sharing is caring kind of environment. So this one obviously needs to go all the way over. Yeah, so as much as the Magellan is being commanded by a military captain, it's not being run like a military vessel. So the military crew are there because of experience. So they're experienced at managing a ship. So when it comes to unknown situations, they've got the training to be able to deal with those situations that a civilian crew wouldn't have the training for. So that's why the military command staff are who they are. Obviously, the scientists are all just scientists. They haven't served in the military. They don't need to serve in the military. They are just scientists. But the military crew that are serving on the vessel are there to deal with problems when they arise. Hence the security staff being military, and the commander being military, because ultimately they know what to do when it needs doing. Okay, so I think what we've ended up with here is pretty good. I might shorten these pipes a bit to move that slightly over, or maybe slightly the other way, just so that we've got more room to have cable looms either side of the lift. I like that that we've got these vertical columns that are coming up here, and they're just going to be packed with pipes and cables and stuff, which is going to look nice. And the same in these corners as well. So we're going to have lots of cable looms coming up through here. Again, so when you're navigating up and down all these gantries, you're just surrounded by pipes, cables, conduits, and all that juicy engineering stuff. Yeah, for sure. We'll punch cable holes through wherever they're needed. Yeah, it's a fair point, Caesar. I think like with the science crew, I think if there is a red alert situation, then either the science crew are told to shelter in place within the labs, or to go to their crew quarters and just stay out of the way. Because in a red alert situation, you want the engineering crew in place on ball. You want the security staff in place and on the ball, and you want obviously the command staff and the bridge staff doing their job. If you're not involved in the safety and protection of the ship, then you should be in your crew quarters. Yeah. Yeah, so the crew will know what to do under a certain alert condition. But yeah, I think science crews and non-essential personnel, lock yourselves in your quarters, I think is probably the best way of handling that, so that the people that are responsible for the well-being of the ship can do their job without falling over people, and without vulnerable personnel being put in a situation where that vulnerability is exposed. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and one of the things we'll do, obviously, is like with the NPC crew, we will actually have them physically doing that. So if you set off red alert, all the NPC civilians will suddenly down tools and head to their quarters, because that's what they're trained to do. Do you mean this one over here? We can get rid of those guides now, they're not needed. Yeah, I suppose you make a fair point that our sick bay facility is kind of huge. So you've got the ward on one side, which can probably fit, well, I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say 6 beds in there. At a crew of 14 as it stands, you're not going to need 6 recovery beds really. And then on the other side, it's just an operating theatre and maybe the medical officer's office. So yeah, we could very much maybe split the room in half and then have the computer core, just because the computer core only needs to take up that much space really. You're right, Timbo, you would definitely. But again, these questions will be answered more fully once we start actually furnishing these rooms, because it's that whole human scale thing again. You don't really start to appreciate human scale until you start putting in chairs and furniture and people and start walking around it, and then you kind of get a more of a feel for the space you've got. And we'll probably, you know, have that when we do the quarters. I mean, we have rather stuck to a grid with this ship, so we do have a scale grid, and all of the walls and everything do align to that scale grid, which is there for the sake of efficiency and making sure things always line up. But I think within that grid we can have flexibility in terms of if we need to put a wall halfway down a grid line, then we should. That's true, yeah. Well, like in this room here, so obviously the pink bits are the wall panels, and they're offset 5 centimeters from the wall. So that's the cavity. What you can see here, actually, that's where the brackets and things will go. So that internal space, wall to wall, when all's said and done, is going to be about 5.4 meters. So yeah, 5.4 meters. That's quite a big space in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, I'm going to stick to squares, I think. But yeah, so I think I like what we've done with this tonight. I think that's the perfect place for the lift. We'll just kind of hand wave the amount of EM radiation you get going up and down there. Like, just riding this lift will probably give you cancer, but still, it's the only place we can fit it. But yeah, and that all kind of works. And I much prefer having having the engineering control room on this deck. I think that's, as much as it does put 2 crew quarters isolated away from all the rest of the crew quarters, that really is the only place they will go, and that works better there, so I'm keeping that there. Okay. Yeah, exactly. We'll just hand wave that. It's really well shielded, which is why the cables are so fat. And on that happy note, we are actually at time. So as Firstis has correctly preempted, that is the end of the stream. So I shall wish you all a very good week ahead, and I shall see you on Wednesday for more, well, I guess we'll carry on with the VIP quarters on the Magellan. So have a good one, everyone, and I shall see you on Wednesday. Bye for now.